Chapter 27, A Trap for the Iggibies. Lily was having a miserable time. She had slung over Slarb's shoulder like a sack of truly roots. From her upside-down position, she was able to see little other than her blonde hair bouncing above her head and the grayish-green scales of the fang's shoulder and back. Slarb's cool skin was smooth and damp, like leaves in late morning, only the wetness on his scales surely wasn't anything as pleasant as morning dew. He stank, a sharp smell that reminded Lily of the compost pile beside the garden, where she was often sent with vegetable peelings and scraps of food. As unlikely as it might seem, Lily actually found herself feeling sorry for Slarb. He probably had no friends, she thought, and no matter where he went, he had to smell himself. Unless, of course, he got used to it. But she dismissed that idea as impossible. Any compassion she felt for the Fang vanished, however, as soon as she spoke to him. "You'll never get away with this," she said in between the bounces. "My brothers and Grandpa will." Slarb snarled and squealed and squeezed his clawed hands tighter around her legs until she cried out. Lily said no more. The boys would soon notice that she was missing, and Nugget hadn't let her down yet. After a while, she began to think that dying would be preferable to the awful stench. She could tell that they had moved gradually uphill in the direction of the Glipwood forest, but there was nothing for her to do. If she somehow got free, she couldn't run away. She had dropped her crutch when Slarb grabbed her, and even if she had it, there was no chance of outrunning a Fang. Finally, they stopped. Slarb had been striding through the fields for half an hour. The only sound he had made was to growl at Lily when she tried to speak to him. He stopped in a cluster of trees at the beginning of the forest, sniffing the air. Lily kept quiet and waited to see what he would do. Surely he wasn't planning to take her into the forest. Even Fangs knew that entering the Glipwood forest meant a fool's death. Slarb chuckled to himself, a sickening sound, and threw Lily to the ground. The fall jarred her, and she bit her tongue hard enough to draw blood. She could taste it in her mouth as she fought back the tears. But Lily brushed her hair out of her eyes and looked up fiercely at Slarb. The end of his tail flitted and rustled around on the leafy ground, the only sound that Lily could hear other than his ragged breathing. His black eyes looked down on her without emotion. "Your brothers will be along shortly, I think," he said, and he slunk over to a nearby tree and leaned against it, a smirk on his scaly face. Lily lay on the ground, thinking hard. She knew Slarb was right. She knew her brothers and that they'd come for her, but this once she didn't want them to. If Slarb didn't kill them, then there was a good chance that the creatures of the forest would. She didn't want them walking into a trap. Lily looked around and saw a large, gnarled glipwood tree a few feet behind her. She scooted back to lean against it. Slarb heard her movement, and he whipped his head toward her and hissed. His long, forked tongue slithered out of his mouth and over his fangs. Lily eased back against the tree. She knew Slarb didn't need much reason to kill her, so she moved carefully. "I'm not going anywhere, Mr. Fang, sir. I'm just leaning against the—" "Silence!" he barked. "The only thing worse than the smell of you humans is the screech of your voices." Lily nodded, her heart pounding. During the several minutes that passed, Slarb was silent, listening. He leaned against the tree, seemingly prepared to wait for days if need be. Lily's mind was still racing, but try as she might, she could think of nothing she could do. One thought kept coming to her mind. "Get out of here. Hobble as fast as your twisted leg will let you. Don't sit here and wait to watch your brothers die." It was useless, but she couldn't bear to do nothing. Lily eased forward. Slarb took no notice. He had cocked his head to the side, listening to something. Just as Lily summoned the courage to turn and try sneaking away, she heard a crash in the underbrush off to her right. "No!" she thought. Lily was certain that it was Jenner and Tink come to find her. Slarb slunk into the woods in the direction of the sound. Using the tree's trunk for support, she got to her feet as quickly as she could. "Run!" she screamed. "It's a trap! Run!" Then she turned and lurched through the brush, hopping along as swiftly as she could, waiting for her brother's screams behind her. Maybe they heard me in time, she thought. Maybe they were able to escape, and maybe they were able to hide long enough to cause Slarb to wander off in the wrong direction. But maybe they were already dead. Lily burst from the cluster of trees and hobbled southward, the direction from which Slarb had carried her. Behind her, she heard a frustrated snarl, and then the sound of Slarb coming after her, crashing through the brush. She pressed on, thinking only that she had to get away from the beast behind her. She cursed her twisted leg and the fangs in the tall grass that slowed her down. Her dress caught on the limb of a duckflower bush, and it jerked her to a stop. Frantically, Lily worked to loosen the snag, looked back in time to see Slarb flying toward her with his yellow fangs bared. She curled herself into a ball, squinted her eyes tightly shut, and prayed to the Maker that it would be over quickly.